it's important for the new audience who are joining to actually
Yeah.
get the context where we'll go now. So, Rami ma'am, over to you. So, you have studied Northeast India. You have stayed in Northeast India for so many years, did research and a lot of things. So, from your perspective as a strategic analyst, what do you think the instability that happened after 5th August and Trump coming in? And there's a lot of happening in Bangladesh where we see the political instability, we see economy going bad, the security of fencing of the border. So how do you think Trump coming in and the new government might come in with election, other things? How is going to affect northeast of India specifically?
First of all, thank you for having me on the show, and my apologies again for being late. But listening to Deep is just every time I listen to him, I find out five new things, and this sort of historical rooting of what is happening today is so important to understand because it gives you like this sort of chain of events that has led to the situation that we see today. And it is similar with the Northeast as well. It's very important to understand, what have been the historical legacy problems in the Northeast region to understand what is the impact that is going to happen. Because the impact of Bangladesh and Myanmar on the Northeast region will be and is the kind of impact that we would have never seen in this country before. With all due respect to the situations that we have faced in the northwestern frontier of our country, we must realize was only dependent on a border that is not a fraction of the border that we see in the Northeast region, but also we were taking on one country. What we see today, and when we talk about Bangladesh, unfortunately or fortunately, we cannot talk about it in isolation. What we are seeing happening in our northeastern border uh, is a culmination of what is happening not just in Bangladesh, but the Bay of Bengal, as well as Myanmar, as well as the change in dispensations and the interest of the West in this region, which is now, which is now very evident. We were doing a lot of guesswork before Sheikh Hasina's ouster, that there's Western involvement. Deep had written a lot about it. I had written about it. So had so many other people saying that, look, they are not saying this. Obviously, a country is not going to go and say, oh, we want a regime change. But, if you had just followed what the US Embassy in Dhaka was doing, what Ambassador Haas at that point, the places that he was visiting, whether, the sanctions that they were putting, even to put sanctions on the RAB, the elite paramilitary force, to openly, continuously keep saying that, oh, we want fair and free elections, we want democratic elections. All were all was leading towards us realizing that there is something amiss here. Now you look at, and I know we are talking about Bangladesh primarily, but like I said, we cannot, because these borders are contiguous. We cannot talk about it unless we understand Myanmar also, because we have a problem of which we've always had. We've had a problem of illegal immigration that has come in via these borders, whether they use the route of Tripura or whether there's demographic change in Assam. This has always been predominantly our problem. But what we have to realize now that Myanmar becoming the top producer of opium, the top producer of methamphetamines, the largest cultivator in the world of poppy, after Taliban cracked down on Afghanistan and it shifted, all the drug cartels shifted their base to Myanmar, it has huge impacts on Bangladesh and therefore the border of the Northeast. Majority of the trafficking of these drugs from Myanmar to Bangladesh is done by the Rohingyas, to the extent that it was having such a big impact on society that there was a death penalty that was enacted in Bangladesh against the traffickers. Um, they use routes not just via Myanmar into Assam, but also via Bangladesh. Therefore, some of the largest hauls of drugs that have ever historically been caught in the Northeast have been in the last 2 years in the in the Northeast in different states. So while you have illegal immigration, you have drug trafficking, and mind you, drug trafficking obviously disseminates to the rest of the country. But a lot of the drugs, apart from methamphetamines, are also injectable, so intravenously used. Therefore, if you realize the highest rate of AIDS today is in Mizoram, so it has health repercussions as well. Number three, terror activity. We've known historically that these borders are porous. We have very, very large borders with Bangladesh and with Myanmar. Uh, the northeastern borders are difficult terrains. They cannot be plugged physically in its entirety. The government of India has initiated an integrated system which will have partial physical fencing, but also surveillance and also manning. BSF is doing a brilliant job in at least the borders of Tripura, but it was with the onset of Sheikh Hasina's government that we were actually able to take some of the insurgent groups. Uh, we were able to control them and bring down insurgency in the northeast, because typically what insurgent groups do is their bases are somewhere else. So their bases were either in Bangladesh. Now you find that they are in Myanmar also. Therefore, they would use these bases, come, attack, do whatever they had to, and go back. What also happened at this point is there was a lot of local support. No insurgent travels with his ration. So when he is covering this kind of distance, he is covering this type of distance because he has local support, sleeper cells. So when Sheikh Hasina came in, there was a lot of crackdown by Sheikh Hasina itself on the camps that were in Bangladesh. Remember that it was also ISI that was supporting these groups via Bangladesh. So one of the reasons that we could bring, apart from the motivated focus of this present dispensation in curbing insurgency, was also that we had great relations with Sheikh Hasina, and that she helped us out in cracking down on their camps. Now, today, what is happening is we have seen an unprecedented rise of the radical element. Everybody realized, and please feel free to disagree with me because I may be wrong, but everybody sort of always had some amount of virtue attached to the secular sentiment of Bangladesh. We always thought that Bangladesh is unlike Pakistan. Therefore, it had the war, and therefore, they wanted their own identity. Little did people like me at least realize that there was this underlying current of, a radical population that still wanted to be with Pakistan. And we have seen that evidence in this conflict and in this change of dispensation. And that is hugely dangerous for us. If you were to ask me to give an assessment, I would actually say 20 to 25% of the population supports Pakistan. The fact that the fact that the father of the nation, Sheikh Mujibur's house was burned down, the fact that his statues have been brought down, tells us that there is this psychological dismantling of the secular fabric of Bangladesh, and it's being taken over by this radical element. We've also further seen cargo coming in, and these are more technical sites. Cargo coming in from Pakistan, where they've said that no checking will be necessary. This spells a great security issue for us. We've seen Chittagong hill tracks implode. We've seen smaller tribes, which have transnational ethnic tribes, not just in Myanmar, but also in Mizoram and Manipur, the bomb zones, like they are called there. We've seen some amount of radicalization there, some amount of weaponization there. It's always been a problem, but we've seen that come about anew. We've seen organizations like ABT, operatives of ABT being caught in Assam within a month of Sheikh Hasina's fall. We have seen a crackdown on ABT sleeper cells in these states. That means they're already existing here. Let me also draw your attention to the fact that the Rohingyas are on our borders, whether it's the Tombu border, whether it's the Chittagong hill tracts. You have a substantial population there. This Rohingya population cannot go back to Myanmar because where they come from, the Rakhine state, is now totally under the control of the Arakan army, which is Buddhist, and which is really the reason that the Rohingyas have been thrown out of Rakhine State. So they don't want to come back. They've even been offered to be taken back, and they've said, no, you cannot guarantee our security. What does that mean? It means that they will sit on these borders. They have militant groups, whether it's the RSO or whether it's the ARSA, who have leadership whose birthplace is Pakistan, who have been trained in Saudi Arabia. It was only a couple of years ago when Tunda, the bomb making specializing expert of Lashkar-e-Taiba, was caught in India. And in the affidavit that was filed in the court of his statement, it said that Tunda had given a statement saying that he was only and only training Rohingyas today to be able, training them in making bombs with the promise that they will only attack India with it, with the training that he imparts. So there's a whole gamut of problem that we are going to see. Now, when you talk about the US dispensation, here's the thing. Um, there are two ways to look at it. One is the money that we know that Trump is cracking down on. He is not so keen to give the kind of aid that was being given under the garb of all sorts of handouts and restoring democracy or so on and so forth. That aid, remember, has only been suspended for 9 months, whether it is in Myanmar or whether it is in Bangladesh. But I think that is going to be a bit of setback to any of these groups, because that was easy money that was coming in. But that doesn't mean that they won't go elsewhere. We already know Yunus has made some trips. He's been moving around post the change in dispensation. We also know Yunus had said some really unsavory things about President Trump. So he knows that the doors are possibly closed there. But remember one thing, that whether Trump has Trump, I believe that Trump realizes the gravity of radicalization and the inability of anybody to control radicalization. I think he has made it very clear that, especially Islamists, is something that he doesn't want to encourage. So we know that he understands that. We know that J.D. Vance understands that, or Vivek Ramaswamy understands that, right? But strategically, the Bay of Bengal is going to become a great place of action. Remember one thing: you have St. Martin's Island that came up in the news. Nothing much has happened about it, but it's always been an island that the Western world has wanted an interest in. US has over 700 bases. The reason that they have based so many naval bases is the US foreign policy is based on their naval strategy. It is said that those who, in American foreign policy, it is said that those who control the seas control the world. And that is what US foreign policy is based on. China has Coco Islands, which is 55 kilometers away from Andamans. There is a post, lookout post in Coco Islands. Coco Islands belongs to Myanmar, has been leased to China. We know the kind of footprint that China has in Myanmar today. The reason China has this footprint in Myanmar is because the US was backing the National Unity Government, which is the democratic forces under this umbrella group, and therefore China started supporting the junta. Um, China also has huge assets from Yunnan to the Shapshu port in the Bay of Bengal of oil and gas pipelines. It is their multi-billion-dollar initiative of their railroads as well. So there's a railroad coming with the oil and gas pipeline. So they have assets to protect. So now, because of the Western interest in pushing the democratic forces in Myanmar, China has gained a foothold and is supporting junta. Now, looking at China's interest in Myanmar and their foothold in Myanmar, whether Trump involves himself in internal processes of these countries is one thing. But whether it looks at it as a geostrategic place of action is another thing, which they might, to counter China and to install their own influence in the Bay of Bengal. Number two, remember that we're just talking about the Americans right now. There seems to be a divergent path between the EU and the Americans. EU might just say no, we still want to interfere because we want to counter India as well. I would
Yeah.
really not I would really not think of this as a very wayward thought if I was to say that one of the reasons that the regime change happened, and I have heard this spoken very often in certain very highly well informed circles, that one of the reasons that the regime change happened as quickly as it did, and there was this disinterest in Sheikh Hasina continuing, was also to teach India a lesson for not taking the stance that America and EU took in the case of Russia and Ukraine. It's almost like the West thought that India is becoming too big for their boots. So when you ask me what is the role of the West, I would simply say that it can go two ways. While we know that they understand the limitations of them controlling radical forces, and which would result in instability of the whole region, there will also be forces that will be forced to do this, not just to counter China, but to counter India as well, and have a footprint in the Bay of Bengal.
Yeah, thank you, man. I think you gave quite a bit of insight and a new understanding and knowledge that I think we might not have because you have studied, you work with a lot of think tanks on this. So I'll come back to you a little bit later. I'll go back to the second question I had with Deepda with context on the politics, the internal politics